It relates to Khamzat Chimaev and Dricus Du Plessis. Number 7 on the MMA news, Brian. Harrington put a little video link to an Instagram video. It's Nick Diaz predicted wrestlers would take over the UFC a year ago.
Now, the way that right now today mixed martial arts works, the way the scoring works, the way it's geared towards wrestling, I don't think it's right for martial arts, for mixed martial arts. I think that it nullifies the action. We want to see a lot of jiu-jitsu. We want to see transitions. We want to see movement. If you can hold people and elbow, just like I've always said, I'm going to have to create the same amount of space to punch down on you as a guy on bottom is going to need to make it back to his feet. But we're holding people, rubbing them out with elbows the whole time, and so that's action. So the ref's not going to stand it up. People should be called for stalling. They should be point deducted for stalling or holding. The guy should be yelling action. I think that should just be added in. This is just my opinions as a martial artist. The strong guy on steroids would love to ignore it. And he wants to go in there and avoid the fight and hold on and get the takedown and win the round. I'd love a 10-minute round.
Thoughts, Paul? I was rabbiting on there about travel stuff for a while. He's
not wrong, right? I mean, the really good wrestlers, like some of these Dagestani guys, some of these guys like Khamzat, they do have the ability to really nullify the fight, but anybody has the ability to learn to get back up. So, I mean, I don't think a point is ever going to get deducted if they're at least striking, but I don't mind these stand-ups that we're seeing every now and then, even in some dominant positions. If you truly are really stalling out in that position, that's going to be controversial. People are not going to like that. I know a lot of people hated any of these stand-ups, or when Herb warned even Aljamain, Aljamain for running later in the fight after he got hurt a little bit. It's like, I don't mind more presence from the referees to kind of force the action. I know some people really want it to just be pure, but I want more action, especially as somebody that was more of a striker. But I don't know.
Yeah,
hopefully,
I mean,
takedown defense will start to sharpen up from some of these guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's just relevant to what we just saw. Nick Diaz saying that 10 years ago. It is down to the fighter to defend. It is mixed martial arts, and I did a video about this, and you can't blame Khamzat. This is the rule set. And you've got to have takedown defense. You've got to have the ability to get back to your feet, but also, you do have to take risks to a certain degree. I know Joe Rogan hates it on commentary anytime someone gets stood up or separated against the fence. I don't mind that, if I'm honest. And I know Mark Goddard was getting a bit of flack because I think, was it Mark Goddard that reffed Khamzat and Dricus?
Yeah.
He stood them up. He stood them up, right? After, 4 or the 5th round. I forget exactly where it was. And Mark Goddard's going to join us on the podcast, by the way, because he messaged me this morning saying he wants to vent. He's got some things to say. He wants to get on the podcast. And I called him back to see what it was, but he didn't pick up. But he did message me saying he wants to come on the podcast. So maybe it's because of that. But, wrestlers are slowly taking over the sport. You got Pantoja, who's a grappler first, but he submits people, he finishes them,
and he does scramble and he does take risks. I think that's not the issue. It's guys that have such an ability to control the actual wrestling portion of it, where they know how to nullify all that space, but in doing that, take away any chance of them being able to really land significant strikes in the process. Even though they're dominating the grappling department, they're not really opening up with damage, and I think that's the issue.
One could argue, though, I'm just looking at all the champs, and there's no champions that really are guilty of doing that, just kind of taking you down and holding them and laying and praying, as they used to call it. I guess Khamzat did that a little bit, but also on the flip side, this is to become the middleweight champion of the world. And it's like, all right, I don't want to take chances here. I'm clearly winning this fight. When Dricus got on the feet in the 5th and final round and had about 45 seconds, he was able to land a couple of shots. I guess you could say it's more on Dricus, really, that he wasn't able to stop anything. I'm a fan of Dricus, but, he's going to be pretty upset with that performance. He owned it. He said, he should have done better. But anyway.
Yeah, he's got to sharpen that up if he ever wants to get that belt back. I just was surprised. I really was a little surprised that he was able to get him down that easily, that many times in that fight, every round, and then hold him there. He looked a little bit lost down there. I don't know how many real high-level wrestlers he brought in to train for that, but there's definitely got to be some adjustments made there, because now guys are going to look at that. Any of the big grapplers in the division, if he starts getting paired up with them, or even guys that have that ability a little bit, are going to use it way more than maybe they would have.
Well, I'm looking at the rankings, and like, obviously Dricus is ranked number 1 because he was a former champion, but I don't think he's going to get a rematch anytime soon. That was as one-sided as a fight's ever been.
Yeah.
And I think I saw Luke Thomas saying this, so I'm kind of copying what he said, but I agreed with what he said. He was like, well, I don't know if I necessarily agree, but Luke Thomas said he doesn't care how much training Dricus Du Plessis ever does. He will never be able to close that gap.
Yeah.
It certainly kind of seemed that way, but what do you make of that, Paul?
I mean, I think just where you're at in your career and how long it's going to take you to potentially get back to that shot. If it's within a year or two, that's a big gap to cover. It wasn't even close when it comes to getting the takedown defense going there. I mean, it was, once he got in, he made one little adjustment and he was on the ground. You'd have to dedicate so much of your time to just wrestling that you would probably actually hinder the rest of your game. I think you got to start thinking about other ways to catch that guy, but we saw guys in other fights have better success with scrambling and forcing him to work. I don't know if it's because Khamzat has committed to maybe going more hardcore into his wrestling than he was before, where he'd be willing to exchange a little more on the feet. Maybe he's thinking, if I really just keep working my wrestling and my control, I don't have to strike with these guys.
Yeah. I mean, there's 2 people that I'm looking at in the rankings that I would say have the best shot. And there are 2 names that would not have been considered a while ago, because you got Imavov, who's fighting next week. We'll be in Paris. Looking forward to that. Looking forward to being back there. He's taking on Kyle Bohio, who's kind of undefeated in a long time. There's Israel Adesanya. I don't think he's itching for that fight anytime soon. Great fighter, of course, but, Whittaker is kind of out of the running, of course, for obvious reasons. The 2 names, Fluffy Hernandez and Renier de Ridder. They're the only 2 guys that I would say that have a chance in the top 10. Imavov's great. He is, and so is Bohio. So, I'm not saying he wouldn't have a chance. That would be unfair. But I think de Ridder, given the guard work that he has, look at what Gilbert Burns was able to do, using the guard and getting Khamzat to back off. And Fluffy is just ridiculous. You know what I'm saying? The cardio, the pace that he pushes, and the grappling of his own. Outside of those 2 guys, and I'll tell you what, I'd still favor Khamzat. I don't see anyone beating Khamzat anytime soon. Yeah.
And the reason I really like the Fluffy side of that is because of that cardio, where I think he causes more scrambles. I think he has the ability to have better defense in those moments, get it to the fence, back himself up to the fence, make him fight there, which Dricus really just wasn't even able to do. He was able to get him down so quickly in the open that even when it was on the fence, just kept dragging him down. I think Fluffy, with his ability in those areas, really presents a problem. He's aggressive on the feet and then not afraid to engage in that grappling. And de Ridder, I think, has that submission threat always. But I think I can see him over time, if Khamzat comes in great shape again, like he did in this last fight, where he could start to wear on him. I think he's still got a shot with his submission skills, but I think Fluffy is, I think that's the guy. I'm not saying to do it, but you're right. That would have the best opportunities to do it.
The only thing against Fluffy, and we'll move on to, because we got a lot of other stuff to talk about, the size is not the biggest 185er. I think if Fluffy was to cut down to 170, he'd be a champion. Yeah. And I still think he'd give Khamzat a good run, but I just think ultimately size might end up costing him. Anyway, all right, today's episode is sponsored by Huel. And if you are a busy man in the morning, if you are on the go, but you still want to get a complete nutritious meal in your body, but you don't have time to do it, well, guess what? Huel is here to save the day. They are today's sponsor and they have you covered. Huel, Huel, and their Black Edition is a complete meal so you feel full, focused, and ready for the day. Huel's already sold over 500 million meals around the world, and now is your turn to try it. New customers right now can get 15% off at Huel.com when you use the code BELIEVE.